Okay, hopefully you gave that a go and you got success with your tests when you ran the checkpoint test inside here. If you didn't, don't worry, I'm going to go through what I did to get that working. So starting off in the auctions controller from the auction service, of course we need to add the publish endpoint so that when we update the auction, we publish that endpoint. And I don't need that auction updated there because the publish knows what type this is going to be. But I've got a mapping in here for the auction updated to go from the auction entity to the auction updated. So I'll just open up the mapping profiles for the auction service. And inside here for the auction to the auction updated, I've also included members because we are updating item properties. And then I've got the extra mapping we need to go from the item to the auction updated. And then we go ahead and publish this endpoint. Notice that it's before we get to the save changes, so if our service bus was down, then this would still work and it would save that message into the outbox in our database. When the service bus comes back up, then of course it would be published. And then we just return OK as normal. So from the other side of things, when our search service receives that, then inside the solution, inside search service, I've got an auction updated consumer. Now this one might have been a bit tricky because I'm not expecting you to know anything about MongoDB entities, so you might have had to spend a bit of time in the docs and trying and failing a few times to get the right configuration to save or update something in a database. I remember when I first gave it a go, I managed to reset all of the properties to null the first time because I chose to use a short solution rather than modifying only the properties that I was interested in updating. So inside this consumer then, I'm using IMapper inside here, which means I've added a mapping profile inside the search service, and let's open up the one from the search service. And I've got the auction updated going to the item. So that's being used inside the constructor here. Then I've got just a write line just to let me know that the consuming action is taking place. Then I've got the mapping to go from the message to the item. And then I've got the result stored in a result. When we do use the update command, this does give us a result to say that something has happened. So I've used that just to throw an exception if there was a problem updating MongoDB. But in the case that we can update it, then all I've done is I've gone out to use the match command to find the item from the database. And then I've said to modify only these properties of the item that we got from the database originally, and then execute async, and then that will update the database. So that takes care of the auction updated consumer. And if we go back to the controller, the delete one is a bit easier. And if we take a look at what's inside here, we don't need a mapper for this because all we've got is an ID that we need to pass for the auction deleted. So what we've got here, after the context at auctions remove, I've got the publish for the auction deleted, and we just need to populate the ID of the auction. And because the auction ID here is a GUID, we need to make this a string because that's what we're sending or have in our auction deleted contract. So no mapping involved on this one. And then inside the search service, what we have is an auction deleted consumer. And all we need to do for this one, we don't need to inject anything here. So I've just got the console write line to say I'm consuming the auction deleted. And then simply all we need to do is use the delete async method, pass in the context.message ID, which is the auction ID, and that goes ahead and deletes that item from our Mongo database. Once again, we do get a result back from this method. I'm not quite sure why it is when we save one, we do not get something returned, but we do in this case. And if that doesn't work, once again, I've just used the opportunity to throw a new message exception and just saying problem deleting auction. So once you have those in place, you'd be able to run the test and they all should pass. So congratulations if you did manage to get that working, and if you didn't, don't worry, just update your code to reflect the same as what I've done in here, or a version of it, and see if you can get the test passing that way. Now, during this section, we've probably got a lot of data inconsistency from various testing and messing around with what we've been doing. So before we do finish this section, I'm just going to stop all of my services, the auction service and the search service, and I'm also going to clear out what's in Docker Compose and restart the services so that the databases are clean, and we've got clean databases before we move on to the next section. So I'm just going to do a Docker Compose down, which I know is going to remove all the data inside those databases as well. And once they've stopped, I'm just going to execute a Docker Compose up to make sure that, and -d to make sure that is up and running. And then I'm just going to simply restart the auction service, and I'm going to restart the search service as well. And the databases should now be clean, and we should be back to 10 auctions in each service. So this brings us to the end of this section. So as per usual, at the end of any section, I'm just going to commit my changes into source control. So I'm going to say git add followed by a period, and git commit -m, and say end of section 4. And then I'm just going to push these changes to GitHub. So I'm just going to say git push origin main and press return. And we'll wrap up with a summary. Okay, now we've reached the end of section 4, and we have introduced the important aspect of messaging in our course, the event bus, and now that's available for all of our services, and we'll be making extensive use of this throughout the rest of the training course. Apart from one service, actually, the identity service, this one's going to be different. This is not going to be connecting to our service bus, and in many ways we can think of that as outside of what we're building here for our microservices, but we are of course going to take a look at that, and very soon in fact. But now we've got our auction service and our search service able to communicate with the event bus, send and receive messages, and we've taken a look at things can go wrong and how we can deal with our different messages and different types of things that can go wrong as well. And like I say, we'll be coming back to the service bus on a regular basis throughout this training course, although not in the next section, because coming up next we're going to add identity into our application, and we are going to take a look at Identity Server to do just that.